I've done a couple of podcast monologues in the past, and whenever I choose to do this, it's always because I feel like me sharing my opinion can help just shed light on a new perspective and one that really isn't, given a platform too often, or one that people are just, it's a topic that is seldom talked about or people are reluctant to talk about it. I did one a couple years ago speaking to the scientific community about ways that I thought we could be having more productive conversation around these issues like COVID and climate change. I did one about the irony of opposing hate and how people are just opposing hate by being hateful, and it didn't really seem like it was doing any good. So I spoke up about that on this platform. And then I also did one sharing my skin story of having severe acne a couple years ago. And my goal with that was to try to relate to other people who might have gone through something similar or maybe some other insecurities and feel like they're not alone. So I guess you could say I have different goals with each of these monologues that I do, but I felt compelled to record this one, and it came from a very similar place to the acne episode that I did. And it's about struggles with dating, friendships, loneliness, confidence, self-isolation, and just all of those themes. And what really sparked this was, I turned 25 a couple weeks ago, and I also just recently went on my first date ever, which is kind of embarrassing, but I feel like I cannot be the only young man in today's world who has struggled with this self-confidence, getting dates, talking to women. I mean, it's really vulnerable, and like I said before, it's embarrassing. But I feel like this is a topic that needs to be talked about more, and not just with dating, but just overall with the whole concept of meeting new people and making friends after college, which I think is something that is extremely difficult, and more, young people are having to start doing that, and it can be really scary. And if you're not intentional or don't really put the effort into that, then it can lead you down a dark path. And what I will say is things have improved in my life in that regard recently. And that's what I want to talk about in this podcast. I don't want it to be the woe is me hour or feel sorry for Dylan. I want to talk about solutions. I want to talk about, the reality of the world that we're living in terms of, putting your social life together as an adult, or making friends, or going on dates as an adult, as a young man. But I also just, the past couple years, I have really struggled with it, and I'm sure that I can speak to some of you about how to make improvements to your social life. I, by no means, have all of this figured out. I feel like I have, miles and miles to go in terms of like the aspirations and the goals that I have. I'm primarily going to be focusing on the perspective from me as a young man, 25, 20s, 30s. But this isn't necessarily just for men. I think women could also benefit from listening to it, so you can sort of learn what us guys are going through, especially, when we're talking about the perspective of dating. But I think that it can be beneficial from, a bunch of different perspectives, but that's just the the point of view that I'm going to be taking it from here. So I grew up as a very shy kid. You know, all the way back to elementary school, you know, I was I have a summer birthday, so I was really young for my grade, and kind of that was in my head that everyone was a year older than me. I was a late bloomer, you know, I hit puberty late, so my growth spurt didn't happen until, you know, I was like 15, and my voice didn't drop until I was 15. And that I was very self-conscious about that. I was self-conscious about looking young for my age. And I think this is just naturally, you know, as you get older, you want, you know, adults try to look younger. But when you're in your teenage years, you want to be taken seriously and you don't want to be talked down to. And that was something that I was really insecure about and that bothered me. And I'm mentioning this because it's sort of setting the scene for, like, it may seem like things in that happened to you in elementary school and middle school, that they're kind of in the past and they don't shape who you are today as a person. And that could not be further from the truth. Like, there are like interactions that I had with people in elementary school that, you know, directly shaped. I say shaped because I've overcome this, and we're going to talk about this next. I've overcome this identity, and they did at one point shape me into the idea or the caricature that I built and what I considered myself. You know, I always considered myself shy, or, you know, people would bully me and make fun of me because I had a high-pitched voice because my voice hadn't dropped yet, or that I was really short. And, you know, from the whole perspective of like dating, like when you have like girls in your own class that are talking down to you all the time, the whole dynamic, especially that identity, carried over through my teenage years and into my 20s, even, of being like just the dynamic of being the alpha male, or like having like, you know, the masculinity that is brought to like a romantic relationship. I just felt was kind of like thrown off course, or like it's just something that I really struggled with. So, you know, and then in high school, for 3 years of high school, I ended up, you know, I transferred to a new school, and I ate lunch by myself for 3 years of high school every single day. And yeah, that is definitely my fault, but also it's kind of, you know, it's sad. And I noticed that there were a couple other kids that did that in my school. And in hindsight, I would have gone over and tried to like make friends with them, but I was just at like that point in my life. And I just, you know, I mentioned that and the lunches just to, again, set the scene. And that sort of, you know, I clung to that identity that I had about myself of being the insecure guy who like just couldn't get the girls. I looked around and like everyone else was older than me and more successful and more confident. And that was the reason why I like just wasn't going to go anywhere, because that's what I believed about myself. But I said, you know what? We're going to put high school behind me. And it's funny, like if there are people in high school watching this, I just think it's very important to know that like high school is not the peak of your life. And at the time, it can seem like, oh, these are the best years. You know, there's like homecoming and prom, and some people dominate high school. You know, they're like the quarterback of the football team, and all the girls love them, and you're just sitting there, you know, looking at that, jealous of it. And yeah, that's it can be very discouraging. And I was actually talking with my cousin about this a year ago. And, you know, at the time he was about to enter his senior year. He just graduated. But he was kind of expressing these concerns to me as well, that like he didn't feel like he fit in high school, and he was just really struggling in that regard. And it was kind of, it was beautiful because I could relate to him, and I could say like, look, you're not alone. I went through the same thing, and I've made improvements, and you really need to just keep your head up and get through it, and just know that there are better things ahead. So, I just think that's a good message right there, that you shouldn't let these things define you, or you shouldn't cling to these identities that you may develop during your childhood. And that's the first point that I want to make, is recognizing what limiting identities are you hanging on to, right? Because this may be totally subconscious. You may not realize that you are telling yourself these things. And, your mind is extremely powerful. If you think that you're an insecure, introverted person who is incapable of going up to a woman and asking her on a date, or asking her for her number, then that's going to be the outcome, and you have to consciously break beyond that. And people kind of laugh at the idea of daily affirmations. When you wake up, look yourself in the mirror and say, I am confident. I am worthy of being someone's friend. I am worthy of, of female attention. And these things sound so fundamental and embarrassing to say out loud. But I'm telling you, if you have these thoughts in your mind of what you are and what your identity is, and you don't address that, then you're not going to change. Okay. So that is my first major takeaway here. And everything has started to improve. I'm not saying it was 180 degrees, like instantly, like a light switch, but that was the first step in the right direction, was acknowledging the identity that I was clinging to and moving on from it. Okay. So that's the first thing. And the second takeaway that I'd like to, put emphasis on today is, once you've gotten over any limiting beliefs that you have about yourself, you have to be the person who is proactive and initiates and makes things happen with your social life in general. Okay. I would always be the person who expected things to happen to me. If I was in a situation like at a crowded event, I would always stand in the corner and wait for people to come talk to me. And I still do that on occasion. But I've gotten better, and more often than not now, I will try to make things happen, from a social perspective. If I'm at an event, or like a public place, or just like a social gathering, and everyone is kind of like standing there in silence, I will be the person to break the silence. I will be the person to introduce myself. And I am no longer going to sit there and wait for things to happen. If there's a woman that you find attractive and you want to talk to her, don't just stand there and wait for her to come over and talk to you. Because most of the time it's not going to happen. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. Sometimes it will. Most of the time it's not. And this also extends into the whole idea of creating opportunities to meet people. We have social media, we're more connected than ever, but at the same time, we are more disconnected than ever. And back to the whole topic of, once you graduate college, like, what are you going to do to meet people, because you're no longer surrounded by a bunch of people who are basically the same age as you in an educational environment where you immediately have common ground. How are you going to meet people? Well, you have to put things on your calendar and make time out of your day to attend things like networking events or inviting friends that you already have over for dinner, or go to a run club, or there are classes you can take. There are, there's intramural sports. There's a lot of opportunities if you look for them. And if you work remotely and you live alone, it's very easy to, you could order groceries. You never have to leave the house in today's day and age. You could get a remote job. And if you don't have roommates, you're not living with anyone, you could like get up and never go outside. And, I'm very happy to say that I more actively resist that than anyone. Every single day I am getting outside, I'm getting fresh air and sunlight. I'm moving my body by exercising, whether it's walking or running. And I make a conscious effort to put things on my schedule. Like I go to a run club every week, and I've been doing that for a couple months, and it's something that I can look forward to. It is a prime opportunity to meet new people. And like, I try to celebrate small wins now. If you go from absolutely no success in friendships or dating, and you're just thinking about the big end goal of like having a bunch of friends, like having a big wedding where you have all of your groomsmen and, your beautiful bride and you're married happily ever after. If you're going from nothing to envisioning that, then it's going to seem absolutely impossible. So that's the third takeaway, I guess you could say, is celebrate small wins. And now, what do I mean by that? Say you're going to a run club every week. You shouldn't be defining success by, if I go to this event and the only way that I'm going to consider it worthwhile or successful is if I walk away with a girl's number and she agrees to go on a date with me, like in the context of dating. Or, I'm only going to consider it successful if, I met a bunch of people and now like it's going to lead to something else. Like I'm going to end up like playing pickleball with them later this weekend. It's, and if none of that happens, then it wasn't worth going to. And that's just that's an unproductive mindset to have, because then you're only going to dwell on like everything being outcome dependent. And right now we need to just be focusing on being proud of showing up and putting in effort. Like if you put the run club on your calendar every week and you take time out of your schedule to go there and show up and say that you talked to 2 new people and made 2 new friends, like you should be really proud of yourself for doing that. Don't consider it a success or failure if like you do or don't walk away with a girl's number, because then you're going to drive yourself crazy. And just back to like looking at what the end goal is here. Don't view the end goal of, getting married as like that's really going to discourage you. And there's, this concept of segmentation, which, I do video production, and a couple of my clients are in the endurance space. Like they run marathons and like these ultra marathons, which are 100-mile races at least. And there's this concept called segmentation, where you have to take a really big goal and you have to break it down into small chunks. Okay. And that's what we have to do here with our social life. If you're completely lost, like if you had never gone on a date, if you had never, like if you don't have any friends, and you're trying to rebuild that post-college, then we just need to take it one step at a time, okay? We need to take a deep breath, and we need to say, okay, I'm going to address the limiting identities that I have about myself. That's number 1. Number 2 is I'm going to consciously be aware of the effort that I am putting in to improving my social life. Am I creating opportunities for myself, or am I waiting for them to come to me? Am I being the person who initiates at social gatherings? Am I waiting, or am I being proactive? Okay. And am I seeing things through the lens of If I showed up and I met one new person, I made one new friend today, then that's a success. Okay. We're taking it in steps here, okay, to move in the right direction. And these are things that I've been actively doing, especially over the past year. And I would say I'm so proud of myself for going on the right in the right direction. Now, I know a topic that is, you may be listening to this and say, well, Dylan, if you're so desperate to like go on dates or whatever and just check that off, then why don't you do dating apps? Well, I don't know. I've refused to do dating apps for several reasons. One of them being that I just think it's easier for women and it's harder for men. And I just, feel like it just boils you down as a person to like just a profile and a couple of pictures, and you're judged off of your credentials, what you do from work. And, obviously attractiveness plays an important role into it. But I just, I wouldn't rule it out eventually, but I just wanted to really see, it seemed like an impossible task, but I wanted to see if I could meet a woman naturally, get a number and go out on a date the natural way without an app. And over the past month, I actually did that. And, it was at a run club, and I did all the things that we talked about in this video. Like, I put it on my calendar. I went. I was the one who initiated the conversation. I'm the one who, followed up once I got her contact and asked to go on the date. And eventually we made it happen. And I did it myself. And again, it's a small win. If the goal is marriage, then I wouldn't have considered that a win at all. So, it's all about taking baby steps here. So another thing I'd like to talk about that has really helped me is avoiding comparison to your peers, or, just scrolling through social media. It seems like everyone has no problems making friends, being popular, going on dates, getting married, falling in love. And if you are looking at that and then you're comparing it to your own life, like, yes, you can use it as motivation that things need to change, but also there are two things that I'd like to say here. One, even though it may seem like you're behind, you're not. You're going at your own pace. Okay? And the other thing is that when you compare yourself to other people, it really takes away, it makes you jealous, and that puts you in, that leads to resentment, and it leads you down this path that like makes you angry, like the world is out to get you. And that's just not, if you play the victim and you just assume that, the world's out to get me, or like women just are purposefully like sabotaging me because they know that I want to be like on a date with them, but they're like, they find joy in like rejecting me, and that like makes me upset. If you view things through that lens and you play the victim, it just sets you up for failure. Okay. You just have to realize that the world is not for you or against you. The world just is what it is. And if there are storms, you have to learn to adjust the sails, and you have to control what you can control. Okay. Like, you can't control certain things like your age or your height, but what you can control are like, first of all, like you can get a haircut. You can pay attention to your grooming, your wardrobe. You can work out to look more fit. And then there's other things like your facial expressions. Are you smiling? Do you look approachable? Do you have good posture? Are you putting your shoulders back? And do you have a firm handshake? Are you radiating confidence or insecurity? Like, these are things that you can control. And if you are just assuming that nothing's going to work out for you because of X, Y, or Z, then you really need to reframe that and kind of think of things through the lens of, okay, yes, I could make a bunch of excuses for myself, like women's expectations are too high, or like social media and dating apps have ruined everything, or society is just like makes things so difficult, or like you can go down the list of excuses. It's really easy to do that and have a victim mindset. But instead, if you just look yourself in the mirror and think of what are ways that I can make myself like a person that like a woman would want to go on a date with, or in the context of friendships, how can I be a good friend? Like, how can I provide value to a friendship or to a relationship? To be a desirable person, to be and appear approachable, and not like you're angry all the time. Because when you come at things from the point of view of being angry and resentful, then like people don't want to be around that. And that was something that I was unconscious of for a long time. And back to what I mentioned earlier about like being insecure about looking young or being like short when I was in like middle school and high school, I thought that like squinting and, looking angry with my face would make me appear older. It would kind of like conceal my baby face a little bit, which looking back on it was just like, what was I thinking? But I realized that is carried over a lot of ways. And sometimes I'll be out in public and I'll like look all pissed off. And that's not a person that like that's not a person that people want to be around, just like work on your smile. And like, it's when you look good, you feel good, like put effort into your appearance. And obviously like if you're working on yourself, then that's going to show, like people will notice that. If it's people who you're meeting for the first time, or just like people will look at you even in public and say like, okay, that's someone that like I want to be around, or someone that I want to meet, or someone who I would like to talk to. And if you're all like hunched over and you look angry, then yeah, no wonder people don't want to talk to you. Or if you are going to go over and try to talk to someone and you're looking like that, then it's not setting you up for success. Okay. This is the other thing I want to talk about, which is get used to rejection. Okay. And, I've talked about this in the past, but just rejection is inevitable. And if you're not getting rejected, then you're not moving and you're not doing anything. Now, obviously, I'm not just saying to like purposefully try to get rejected. It's like, oh, Dylan just had to get rejected. I'm going to go out and I'm going to be all arrogant. And, if people are going to reject me, then that's a good thing. It's like, no, if you're coming from a good, genuine place of wanting to meet new people and make friends and like get more dates, no matter how kind and well-intentioned you are, you're going to get rejected because not everyone is going to be in the right place in their life, or maybe someone's just having a bad day, and you shouldn't take any of that personally. Okay. And that's all a part of it. So that's the other thing, is just building up a tolerance to rejection. And that goes in so many facets of life, not just like people wanting to be your friend, or like women wanting to go on a date with you. That goes into like business. If you're on sales calls and people like would rather go with someone else, or they think your offer's bad, then you can't get offended by that stuff. Okay. All you can worry about is you and what you have control over, what you're bringing to the table. And not everyone is going to want to accept what you have to bring to the table, regardless of how good it is. So once you realize that, it puts you in a much better mindset of just controlling the controllables. And what I'd like to wrap up with is just something that has brought me a lot of peace, and that is learning to be content with the season of life that I'm in. And this sort of goes back to the comparison trap that we fall into so often, which is that, if I look around and 3 of my college friends, like I went to 3 weddings last year, and all my college friends are my age, they're all getting married, and yet here I am, 24, 25, and I've never gone on a date before, and they're already married and they're in that chapter of their life and I'm not. And I used to think about it as if it was some sort of race, and I would be extremely jealous of it. But one thing that I've come to realize is that, I'm 25, like I'm still very young and have a long way to go, hopefully. And I need to realize that the timing may not be as quick as you would like it to be. And, looking back on it, when I was realizing who I was in high school and what I thought about myself, or, I had a severe breakout with my skin in late high school, mostly early college, and all of the stress around, COVID when all of that happened, I was not ready for like a serious relationship back then. And I feel like at this point, like I'm in a much better position to, you know, start dating or have a relationship because, I've actually established my career for a couple years and, I just feel more confident overall. And I feel like I've been on this journey and that the timing is much better. And you can't notice that in the moment sometimes. You have to take a step back and realize, like, okay, maybe everyone met their spouses in college, or maybe someone married their high school sweetheart, and that's great for them. But also, you don't need to compare yourself, and you shouldn't be jealous of what other people have. And that has given me so much peace because I'm realizing that I'm on my own path and I need to be content with that. Now, that's not to say to be content and complacent, like I don't need to make any changes because obviously, comparison can motivate you, but it can also distract you from what things that you should be focusing on, or it can also take away gratitude. And it's so important to have gratitude in all of this. And that's just something that I really like to preach all the time. And, people that know me kind of can get tired of it. I'm like a broken record, but, you could be so upset, that you don't have a girlfriend, you've never had a girlfriend, or you don't have as many friends as you would like to. But look around and like, do you have a job? Do you have a roof over your head? Like, do you have food on the table every day? Like, are you healthy? Like basic fundamental things, clean running water, lights in your house. There are things that other people in the world would like just there are essential things that people just do not have that we have, and we take so many things for granted and we invent a lot of problems in our heads sometimes. Now, I'm not going to I'm not trying to detract from like what we've been talking about. Like I think there are a lot of things in the 21st century, like in the year of 2025, that have made things more difficult to socialize and, go on dates and make friends, especially post college. But sometimes that desire or that the aspiration to have more and more and more can just be really, it can take away from things that, make you just appreciate the season of life that you're in and what you have, and to just have gratitude. So I think that's a good thing to just leave, to end this on, because this just does wonders for me. Whenever I get worked up about something, or like I'm angry, that I got rejected, I just try to remember all the things like that I've been blessed with. I have a great place to live. I have a loving family. I have friends like that I can turn to if needed. I have a successful business that I run doing what I love. I have clients that appreciate me. I have work on my plate like every single day and every week. None of it's guaranteed, but yet like I have so much to be thankful for. And, just because like you look around, there was like another profound moment, like uh, a couple weeks or months ago, however long it was. But, I was at a baseball game by myself. I'm a baseball fan, and I was just sitting there alone in the stands, and I looked around, and everyone around me like was, with their significant other. And I was sitting there by myself. And I was just so, I sort of started to go down this downward spiral of like, why can't I have that? Or why is it so easy for them? And I've just realized that like they have problems in their lives that I don't have probably, or that just because they're with someone doesn't mean that they're happy. Like, and it's all a facade. Oftentimes what you see online on social media, everyone's happy, everyone around you's with someone. You assume that their relationship is perfect and you become jealous of these things. And I think oftentimes you just have to worry about what you could control, realize that you're on your own path and look yourself in the mirror and just say, you know what? I'm going to do the best that I can to improve myself. And other things will happen if I put effort into them. But if they don't happen right away, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not moving forward just because I'm doing these things. Okay? Like things will get better over time. It's like you go in the gym, right? And like you lift weights and then you look yourself in the mirror and there's no change. Like you have to keep putting reps in order to see a difference. And that's the thing with your social life is you have to do all the things that we talked about today. And if you continue to do those, then things will gradually get better. If you want to go on a date and meet a woman naturally and get her number and stuff like that, in terms of rejection, you're going to ask a lot of women and they're going to say no. And as a baseball fan, it's like, it's a game of failure, just like baseball is. They talk about like the best home run hitters who hit hundreds of home runs in their career. Oftentimes, the thing that no one talks about is they will have like some of the most strikeouts ever because like they tried so many times to hit a home run. And if you're going out there and you're only going to, ask out 5 women and 5 of them say no to you, like it's like getting up to the plate 5 times and not hitting a home run. Okay? Because that is not a good indicator of your success as a baseball player or your ability to hit a home run. And likewise, it's not a good indicator of, your attractiveness or your ability to get dates or just your ability to be someone who is worthy of being a friend or getting social attention in that aspect. Okay? So yeah, you have to keep trying and realize that it requires conscious effort and all these things. And it's a big mindset shift too. A lot of this stuff is in your head. You got to realize this. Like sometimes your greatest enemy is you. Like the things that you're telling yourself, the things that you are doing, the things that you aren't doing. And the more that you can just not blame others, not realize that like, oh, my circumstances are what they are, or I was dealt a bad deck or whatever. Like the more that you can move away from that and say, okay, I'm going to do what I can to like create my own new set of circumstances that it doesn't matter who you were in middle school or high school or college even, like you have the opportunity to be a confident person if you want to. You are a confident person and you are worthy of attention. You are a valuable person who can make as many friends as you want to, genuine friendships. But it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen until you start putting conscious effort in. So anyway, I sincerely hope that this was helpful. I think that it was worth coming on camera and talking about this today because I think it needs to be talked about more. And people, especially young men, need to realize that they're not alone. And this is just something that, if not addressed or not dealt with, can have very serious consequences, like in our society. And I think there is a crisis going on among young men. And I don't use the word crisis lightly. Men who are increasingly self-isolating and being angry at the world or angry at women or building up all of this resentment can lead to very bad things. So I think that, if you are like a young man doing a lot of these things, these things have helped me tremendously. And I have a long way to go. And in many ways, this podcast recording was sort of like a therapy session for myself to talk about these things out loud, because it will help me implement them more. And the other thing I'd just like to say is don't hold these things in. If you're frustrated or you want to talk about solutions like this, there are people who will want to talk about these things with you, whether it's family or like just bring it up and don't hold it all in, because that can be like the worst thing you can do. And likewise, if you have other like friends, be that person for them that they can talk to or you can encourage them. And it's kind of like I was talking about, like with my cousin last year, I could sense that he really appreciated like the conversation that we had, because, just realizing that you're not alone and that you can talk to people about things that you're insecure about or frustrated about, it goes a long way. And I hope that this podcast is something, at least a small contribution towards that goal of sort of normalizing a conversation around this. So anyway, again, I hope this was helpful and I wish you all the best.